Welcome to C Programming Tutorials. This is a production of YouTube channel Learnorama and the Facebook page Awesome C Programming Tutorials in High Def. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I would recommend that you do so that you can be notified of any new tutorials that I post whenever I post. And also I would appreciate if you could become a fan of the Facebook page as well. Okay, so in this tutorial we are actually going to write the program to delete some data from a file. This is in a way continuation from the previous tutorial. In the previous tutorial, tutorial number 43, we learned the algorithm to do that. But in here, right now, we are going to code that algorithm. So let's get started. So let's see. This picture is from the previous time when I was explaining how to actually delete data from a file, and this is a sample file that we are going to use. The name of the file is abc.txt. It has a whole bunch of names here, and as you can see, Joe, the name Joe is being repeated from in this file from time to time, and we want this name to be deleted from this file. So that's what our goal is, to basically after running that program, we should have this file modified so that it has all the names except Joe in it. Okay, so let's get started. So first we said that we are going to use a buffer which will hold the entire file in here except the data that we have to delete. So that's all we have to do. We are going to, the algorithm, in a sense, what it is that you read one line at a time and you say to do you want to delete it? If no, you put it in the buffer. If you want to delete it, just skip it and read the next line. So you read the next line, you put it in the buffer. Read the next line, put it in the buffer. We learned that we have to use a pointer to actually keep moving the location where we are going to be putting the next data or the next line in here. Okay, and we also need, obviously we need some variable line or a string line where we are going to be reading one line at a time. So buffer will be holding the entire file contents, the output file. The pointer will be pointing to the next location in the buffer where the next line is going to go into, and line itself will be the string that we'll be using to read one line at a time from the file. So very simple. So let's get started. So obviously we need a line here. The line has to be as big as the biggest line that you expect in this file. In this particular example, we only expect, the line to be no greater than 20 characters. So we are going to make it 21 characters because we want one character to hold the end of string character. Now we open the file. We check to see if it was successful, which means that the pointer is not null, and then we read the entire file one line at a time. And how do we read lines? We learned that we can read lines using fgetS, right? What is the syntax? You need to pass the variable where you want to read the line into, which is this line variable itself, and you specify the maximum number of characters that you want to read, and then we specify the file pointer. If we learned about this function a few tutorials back. If you haven't watched it, please do so. Okay, now at this point we will have one line here, and if I leave this program like this, what we are going to do here is that we are going to keep reading the one line at a time until we hit the end of line. So we now have a mechanism to read one line at a time until we hit the end of file. Okay, but what we have to do, we have to keep putting this line into a buffer. So we need another variable buffer. So how do we create a variable buffer? Buffer variable will be an array of characters, right? So it will be just like any other string, right? So buffer, and you have to make it as big as you expect the size of the file would be. In this particular case, it's very small. So let's make it 1,000 characters long. Okay, but Now look at this. There was a long time back we did a tutorial where we said that do not create very long variables inside the functions. Okay, int main is a function. We don't want this buffer to be 1000 bytes long inside this function. Okay, so this will be created this way. It will be created in the on the stack. We don't want it to be created on the stack. We don't want the stack to be too long. It can cause problems. Okay, so what do? We actually created a pointer. The pointer is very small, only 4 bytes normally. Okay, so very small, just pointer. It should be pointing. It will be pointing to a buffer in memory. Where is that buffer gonna come from? So here, if we go back to this, let me use my pen here. What we want is this buffer to be actually a pointer, not the array, and it should be pointing to this whole buffer. So we have already declared a buffer which is just this square. Okay, where is this whole buffer gonna come from? We learned in that tutorial also that what do we have to do? We have to allocate this memory. How do we allocate the memory? We do this. We use malloc function. So one of the tutorials says, you know, in the title of the tutorial it says malloc. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, please watch that tutorial. Now malloc actually allocates memory for us in heap, and that could be huge. Okay, you can allocate, you know, thousands and thousands and megabytes of data as well, you know, as long as you don't overrun your memory itself. But you can have big huge amount of data here. So how many bytes do we need? We said we need 1000 bytes. Okay, and actually we said we need 1000 characters. So what is the number of bytes? It will be 1000 multiplied by size of char. Now size of, it looks like a function, it's actually an operator, but think of it as a function also. It doesn't harm you. It basically what it does is you can pass the type and it will return you what is the size of that type. A character usually represents, we know that it only needs 1 byte, but it's always a good idea to use size of character or size of whatever the type of this buffer is, buffer pointer is, okay, which is character, and then multiplied by 1000, which will make it 1000 bytes, and then you store it here, and then you have to cast. Well, in C you don't have to cast. Okay, this should just work without this cast. It will work just fine. But in C++, since we are using C++ compiler, you have to cast. So I'm going to cast it here, and this is how you cast. What malloc does is actually malloc returns a void pointer. In other words, it returns a pointer to nothing. Okay, no, it doesn't have any type. That pointer does not have any type to which it's pointing to. So you have to explicitly say that, okay, I want to convert this into a character pointer type, because our buffer is actually a character pointer, because you are assigning it to buffer. So what malloc is going to give you is an address of this location that it has allocated. So it will allocate all this data or all this memory here, this whole entire buffer, and then it will return the address of the first byte, and we are going to store it into this buffer pointer here. Okay, so we are going to say buffer is equal to this thing here. Now one more thing, we want this buffer to be initialized to all zeros. Okay, one way would be to run a loop and initialize each character to 0, but there is a faster way of doing it. There is a function called memset, and you pass the start address of that memory, the number of bytes in that memory, which we know is the same as what we allocated. Sorry, actually you specify the value that you want to store in each of the elements, and then you specify the total number of bytes here. Okay, so buffer, which is the start address of the location, the value that you want to store, which is 0 in each element, in every byte, which is 0, and then the number of bytes, which is the same as the one that we use at the time of allocation. So at this point, after running this function, after executing this function, what is it going to do? It's going to zero out, it's going to write zeros to each of these locations, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. So that is very important. Whenever you allocate a buffer, you zero it out. This is very important. Okay. The other thing we said is we are going to use a pointer ptr. Okay, again, if you did not watch the tutorial where I am explaining all these things, you please do that. So we need this pointer, which is also a character pointer, just like this buffer. The only difference is that it will keep on moving. We are going to keep on moving this pointer to the next location which is available to write the next line. Okay, so it will be just the pointer, and we will initialize it. What are we going to initialize it to? We are going to initialize it to the start address of this buffer, because obviously the first, we said the pointer ptr is going to point to where the next line is going to go to. In the beginning, the next line, the first line that we read is going to go to the beginning of this buffer. So we have to initialize it with the whatever the address is in this buffer pointer. Okay, so at this point, sorry, I have to stop here. Keep watching. Thank you so much.